We're live? Okay. I'd like to call to order the March 7th, 2023 Columbia Borough Council work session. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilperson Zink.
Here.
Councilperson Kaufman.
Here.
Councilperson Stahl.
Here.
Councilperson Fisher.
Here.
Councilperson Price.
Here.
Councilperson Littner.
Here.
Councilperson Bernard.
Here.
Mayor Lips.
Here.
Would anybody like to offer invocation? If you would like to, please rise for a moment of silence. Chief Romer, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcement of executive and information sessions, there were none. Are there any additions, deletions, or reorganization of the agenda needed? None. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as published? I have a motion by Councilperson Kaufman, second by Councilperson Stahl, to approve the agenda as published. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Next, citizen comment, non-agenda items only. I would like to preface this section by saying this is for comments only on non-agenda items. It is not meant to be a question and answer session. Along with that, there are only 2 times that it is appropriate to comment during the meeting, and that is in this section for citizen comment non-agenda items, and also during the discussion prior to council taking action. It is not appropriate to comment on reports or other members of the board's comments. The first sign up we have is Brad Chambers.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to comment on the prior meeting, and I just wanted to get some clarification. Well, just a comment, you don't have to answer the question. It seemed like there was, I don't really know what happened last meeting. I believe there was a friend who asked a question, and after that, it said there was no questions. Then my question was answered, and then there were no questions throughout the whole meeting. And I just wanted to let everyone know that I will be running in May, and I have no issues with answering questions to the public. And I have no intention of removing landlord's property if they have three strikes from individuals who they rent to, who they have no control over. So I just want to let everyone know that if they don't want to see those things, they can vote for me. Thank you.
Mayor Lutz, Chief Romer.
I'll start off. This week started street sweeping. I've heard from several residents that they really like the information on TextMyGov. They were so appreciative of that, and that they were reminded. And the nice thing, the thing they like about it is they don't have to seek it. It's sent to them. And so I just wanted to bring that up, that we need more people in this community to get onto that app so that they receive that information. It really is. It's a great tool. I'm glad you all did it. And like I say, I'm hearing good comments out of it from folks out there on the street. The other issue, I don't know if you saw this. I don't know. I can't remember if I pass this stuff around on the stormwater or not, but if you all get the Borough News. Last issue of Borough News. There's 2 memorandums in there, 2 companion bills addressing stormwater facilities on state roads. And it's something we talked about for a long time. There's a member of the House that intends to introduce legislation and a member of the Senate that intends to introduce legislation making PennDOT responsible for surface water on their roads. The hook on it, this is good, but the hook on it is it's only good, it will only be good to municipalities with 2,500 people or less. And as soon as I read it, I said, what about us? What about the rest of the state? You know, we have state roads that go through our municipality too. And I am reminded of the over $100,000 issue we had off of Route 30 up on between 13th and 14th Street a few years ago. And that's not to say the anguish that was caused and financial loss to the residents that were affected by that. You know, so I contacted both Representative Miller and Senator Ahmet. I sent them both a letter asking them to support this legislation, but that it include every municipality within the Commonwealth. So I would advise you to think about possibly getting letters off to our representative and senator as a council, voicing your opinion on that. I think it's about time. I also talked to I'm on the local government advisory committee to the Bay, and we're meeting next week, and they put this issue on their agenda. So we'll be discussing it. They're going to try to get someone from PennDOT there to address this issue. And we have been harping, the local government advisory committee has been harping for a couple years now on this exact thing. It's their water, their road, their water, they need to take care of it. And some of the municipalities that have enacted stormwater fees are trying to get PennDOT to pay up for the stormwater that's coming off. So this has a big impact. I ask you to get behind that legislation. Chief, you have anything?
Nothing. Thank you.
All right.
Can I ask the chief a question, or is this an appropriate time? Sure. Well, it's,
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
Okay, last week at the meeting, Mayor Lutz mentioned that there was 3 drug busts within a short period of time in Columbia. And I just wondered, I only ever saw one published in the news. I just wondered if we'll hear more about the other 2 or not.
Yeah,
If the public will hear more.
Sure, information was released in a press release on the other 2 as well.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
All right, workshop items. The first is the history and overview of the Lancaster County Land Bank Program in Columbia. Would you like to do this, Mark?
So the mayor and I were talking, Heather and I were talking about the land bank and their success here in the community. I know that Columbia is one of a few municipalities currently that is partnering with the land bank to help redevelop properties. So I reached out to them and said, hey, listen, can we get a status report of where we are right now, what's been accomplished to date, and then, you know, going forward, I think this would be a good annual review of the efforts that have been put in. The borough committed money initially to seed money, I'll call it. I believe it was $200,000 we committed initially to help fund this program, and how far that investment has gone. I can tell you in recent conversations that money still exists in the land bank funds. They haven't spent it all because when they purchase a property and sell it, that money goes back into the program. So it just keeps refunding itself over time. So what you have in your packet is that report from the land bank to look at the investment that has been made in this community since 2017. And it's impressive. And what is really nice to see is that, you know, 7 projects have been completed to date. Currently, we have 9 in process. So it's only increasing, and the impact of the value of the land bank is only growing. So this is a program that I've seen work in a couple other communities. I know that they are reaching out right now to other municipalities here in the county to get more involved. And Sean and Michaela have asked me, you know, can we use Columbia as an example? I'm like, absolutely. You know, I'd be glad to talk to people about it and the strengths and the benefits it's brought to this community. So that's what you have. You can go down through it. I won't take a whole lot of time going down through all the properties, but if you just look at the pictures of before and after, it tells quite a story. But then you look at the bottom line, that we have increased the property values by over $300,000. That's a real number. That's impressive that, you know, that investment has really increased the land value. Does it increase our tax revenues? Sure. Not a huge number, but it increases the quality of life and for people who move into that house, and it encourages others around them to start picking up their property. So it's a slow burn, it's a slow process to get, you know, long-term benefits, but to me, that's kind of playing the long game, if you will, saying, you know what, every house we fix up is a plus for this community and provides another quality home for a homeowner or resident here. So, Mayor, would you want to jump on that?
Yeah, just real quick, I asked Mark if he would do this, and this is, to me, this is a fabulous report. This is something that I longed for to see coming out of the land bank. But now we've developed enough history of the land bank to be able to do this properly. And I said, Mark, if you're going to introduce this at council meeting, I'd like it to be entered into the minutes so that it flows. And I would really suggest that that council look to maybe just the text part or streamlining it down a little bit and putting it on the website. This is really important information. It shows the investment that you made in the land bank and how it's paying off. And you know, there's another side to this. If you look at the homes that have been completed through this process, it's a plot, and then there are associated programs through the redevelopment authority that will help first-time home buyers get into these properties. So not only are we rehabbing the properties, yeah, we're increasing the property value, but we're rehabbing a property. They're beautiful homes. If you've ever been in the ones that are completed, they're beautiful. And there is some assistance to allow first-time home buyers to buy one of these homes. And we have had success with first-time home buyers buying these homes. And then take it one step further, the ones over on South Fifth Street that are going to be built by Habitat, they already have residents signed up for them. And that's on a program where they put some sweat equity in it and ultimately become the owner of that property. So this whole program is wider reaching than just buying a house and rehabbing it and selling it. It has far reaching effect on that. So great report. And when we have another face-to-face meeting, I'll let Michaela know that she did a good job. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, next week on the agenda, there will be 1 or 2 properties, for us to approve to go into the land bank program, so. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on the land bank?
I'll just have a comment. I would agree with the mayor that they really do look very nice once they're done. I was in 3 of the ones that are pictured here upon completion, and they did look really nice. So they were quite appealing for someone that might be looking to buy a property.
All right.
The other nice thing about that, and I want to leave this, but if you look at the location of the land bank properties, they're spotted throughout the community. So it's just not like you picked a neighborhood is boiled down into that. There's fire around. And as Mark said, the hope is you fix this house up, and we've seen it happen. You fix this house up and the neighbors say, hey, I can do that. You know, how'd you do this? I believe I can do that. And next thing you know, the whole rock starts to take on a different look.
All right, next is the discussion on short-term rentals. We wanted to bring this forward to council, to see if there is a desire to change this short-term rental ordinance, that was instituted in 2019. Mark, you wanna, I'm kind of off here.
So in your packet, you have two things. One, the ordinance that established the short-term rental, policies and procedures here in the borough. The other document is one that was prepared by the Lynch County Planning Department to kind of be a white paper on short-term rentals and what to look at and what to, consider when you're doing this. Sharon and I reached out to a bunch of municipalities to see, what our neighbors are doing, and I can tell you that it's kind of all over the map. You have some communities that are embracing it and putting regulations around. Some are trying to steer away from it. They do not want to see them. So it's not an easy thing to look at from a regulatory standpoint. I would just say that my own experience has been when short-term rentals are properly managed, then it can be a plus for a community. When they get too concentrated, they can take over and change the character of the neighborhood. I think it's trying to find that balance, in my opinion, to see, where do we want them, where do we want to have them, and what level of impact are we willing to accept in the different neighborhoods. And I think we can formulate, if you guys are interested in changing anything, code regulations that would allow us to expand where they're located, expand where they're allowed, and ensuring that we're protecting still the neighborhoods that are around. So that's kind of the goal here, is to have this conversation and talk through where we as you as council would like to see this go, to see it expanded. We have, help me Sharon, I think 2 right now registered short-term rentals that in the borough. One is on North, up on Locust Street, 1100 block? 1100 block of Locust.
653.
I was close.
Is the other one.
Yeah, that's
I was in the right town. And then the other one is Justin's up on 500 block. So we have 2 here in town. I was same town, right area, across from the cemetery. Those are the 2 regulated, known ones that we have here in the community. You all are well aware of the fact that somewhere in the neighborhood of Chestnut Street, I'll get the block wrong again, 700 block of Chestnut Street, we had we discovered one that was operating without a permit and license. And they went to the zoning hearing board, asked permission, the zoning hearing board denied that one. But all of these things have raised the need for discussion, in my opinion, of where do we want them, how do we want them, and how do we want to do that here. There are people here in the audience that they're here to talk about it and speak to it. Staff has gone through it. Evan and I have gone through and looked at it. So in my mind, let's open this up for discussion, Heather, and let's get this talked about. I will say, for everyone's knowledge, if you look on the maps here on the TV, the medium density residential business, which is the blue zone right here, is the only place currently within our zoning ordinance where short-term rentals is allowed. So
the 2 we have
are outside of that.
received special exemption.
Use variance.
Yeah.
Well, the one was grandfathered in because it was existing before the ordinance went in.
Right.
And the last one was a use variance.
You start your discussion by saying, when I started to look at this, I thought, of all the homes, the larger homes and all that are in Historic District, what about mirroring the historic district as far as the location?
Are you saying just have them in the historic district?
You have a district set up and typically the historic district are the larger homes, larger, I don't want to say mansions, but larger homes that are conducive to, that type of, for example, down here on Cherry Street, the 200 block of Cherry Street, all that large. To me, they're probably very difficult for a single family rental, but they could be real nice homes if you were using them as a short-term rental. And I use the word bed and breakfast, which I like better.
So I'm in favor of the concept. But I believe we have to change some of our code rules as well.
Okay.
To start off, I think there should be an annual inspection. Short-term rental.
And I don't disagree. I can tell you from looking at a lot of them, and I'm sure Sharon and Mark have found this as well, that most municipalities do have that. I mean, I think you could do something very similar to either the inspection that you do for long-term rental properties, or, something like the non-binding safety inspection that we ended up with for home sales. So, I think either one of those would be appropriate, but, you already have an inspection checklist for rental properties, so you
But
can
that's-
certainly adapt.
That's every 3 years, where a general rental,
Yeah,
a general tenant is in for a period of time. Whereas short term, you have hundreds of people in and out of that property within a year. So I believe in this instance, we should increase that to annually. Secondly, I'm not sure that it's defined properly, and I could be wrong, but we have to figure out some way to determine bedrooms to parking spaces. Because I see areas where, Cherry Street is a good example. They had 4 bedrooms, is that 4 bedroom?
5.
5 bedroom,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Cherry Street. Your property now.
The one in,
Yeah, that's not a short-term rental.
no,
Well,
one
it
in the
was
bedroom.
going to be.
Oh, it was?
They had applied for a short-term rental in that property initially, but that's a 5-bedroom house, right?
It is a 5-bedroom.
Yes.
Right.
Sorry. I
And
didn't
they
know.
were required, I think they were required 4 parking spaces. Or 2. Okay. That's a little off, because generally, there's going to be more than just 2 cars for 5 parking spaces. So I think we need to come up with a system that says number of bedrooms or number of adults for parking spaces required. And finally, I'm sure this will upset some people, but, I was really sold on the short-term rental idea, the fact that these owners, they generally rent their homes because they draw a certain clientele. And I think because of the laws and the reputation that a renter would have, or a landlord would have, their whole business is based on reputation. So the better they can keep it upkept, the less they have complaints from neighbors and anything else, the more successful they are, the more successful the neighborhood is. So where I was going with that is, I believe there's homes throughout Columbia everywhere. And instead of giving a certain group of people the right to do short-term rentals, I think it should be throughout the borough.
so if.
The other reason I bring this up is we have a business district, we have the river park, and we're building a aviation industrial park out in McGinnis. That area out there is gonna be a technology center where people will be coming and going constantly. And there's some big homes out in Main Street who may want to profit on that.
So, just as a question to you, if you did that, would you, one thing that we see a lot is that you'll restrict the number of short-term rentals that could be on any particular block, or, you know, not within 150 feet of another one or 100 feet of another one, so that you don't turn every house on a block into that. That's just something that you see a lot in these ordinances
I like
to
that.
help to kind of keep it from overtaking a neighborhood.
I like that too, except for I don't think it's fair to my neighbor. You know, if I was beside you and I got there first, you're out of luck. That's not fair either. And we gotta be fair to everybody. And give everybody that opportunity, you know?
Well, Eric, I understand what you're saying, I see where you're going with it, but, I don't know if you read the hearing. But,
No,
I
I was
think,
at the zoning hearing, I was at the planning commission.
I sort of think I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, the gentleman who lived there and spoke, his concern was lowering the property value of his home that he's been in for almost 50 years. And, that being said, I believe he also added that, you know, if he were looking for a property, he wouldn't want to necessarily purchase one that was beside it, or short-term rental. And I understand that, you know, because some people wouldn't maybe want to live right beside it. So his concern was that, you know, he's kept his home up and paid taxes for all these years, and then a short-term rental comes in, and possibly if he wants to sell, is he gonna get the same amount he would if it wasn't there and it was regular residential? So I think we have to consider the neighbors in that respect when we're looking at this. If we're gonna make it all over the town, or what we're gonna do, we have to.
I don't necessarily see that as lowering property.
And maybe some people don't, but I'm sure that he's right, I'm sure some people do.
But I'll go back there and say, yes, I like it to be in all over town because there are homes all over town.
I believe the concept or the idea that it would lower value is probably correct. I think most people probably believe that there's around you beside that's gonna lower the value. I do believe that's
Well, I mean,
correct.
I'm just saying
I don't
what he
believe-
said, and I don't
I don't
disagree
believe,
with him.
I don't believe it's actually true. I think it's the opposite. I think because it's a business and they need to upkeep to be able to sell more, I think this actually raises the value. But I think the perception
mentality, yeah, the
Perception.
buyer's perception.
is it's lower, yeah. So I do agree with you on that. I understand where he was going with it as well. And yeah, I don't want a beach resort. You know, I don't want Columbia to open up 5 months out of the year for the river and stuff. But at the same time, I find it very hard for me to say, you can put your house up, but you can't, you know what I mean? I find that very difficult. And I don't think, Columbia is very unique because we have like different sections. For a small borough, we almost have a big city, different sections. We do have this, you know, Chester Street, 300, all the ways up to the funeral home, the old funeral home. You know, there's some big homes up through there. They'd be perfect if somebody wanted to do that. You know, if somebody wanted to convert their home. Again, McGinnis, and you have River Park. That's a strong attraction. We have, out on the western side of Columbia, you have all the antique stuff and stuff. That's an attraction for a certain group of people. It's all over Columbia. You know, so I don't want to limit it to just one area.
I think the parking, nailing down the parking to whatever you would see as needed, I think that will create that strata, that will spread it out. Because not every home that may be attractive as a short-term rental may not be able to meet that criteria.
Correct.
So I think that will help spread it out. And I really feel strongly, and I think the neighbors would really feel strongly, that there not be 5 or 6 vehicles on the street in their neighborhood, that 5 or 6 vehicles in the backyard, in a parking area, something like that, is gonna be much more, easier for them to handle.
And we're talking about just detached homes, right? No.
I don't know if I'd
This-
limit,
It says detached.
That's what our current ordinance says,
Yeah.
yes.
but
Okay.
that would eliminate
A lot
a
of
huge portion of the borough.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with that.
Would you change the parking requirements by zone? Right, like if
No.
someone wanted a short-term rental in the downtown commercial district, would that be different than, somewhere uptown? No.
No, I think we
I
can
don't
figure out,
think it can be.
I think you have to figure out some kind of calculation where you use number of beds to parking spaces.
A lot of places require a bedroom for every 2 people so you can only, like, if you have 5 bedrooms, the max number of people that could stay in that house in the short-term rental would be 10.
Right,
So maybe you base it on that or something like that.
right,
Well,
that's
It would stand to reason, 1 vehicle per bedroom.
Mhm. Something like that, yeah.
Well, Evan, a while back, and this does go back before I was on council, but I believe the address was 116, but I'm not positive, so I probably shouldn't say it, but North 4th Street, there was talk about someone came, I don't know how far it went, but they wanted to make a short-term rental, and that was kind of a row home almost, or at least a semi, I can't remember. I don't know what the status is on that now, if that ever sold, or what's going on with it, but, for me personally, I don't think I'd appreciate living connected to someone that was in and out all the time, and, I just know, I personally wouldn't like having.
Is it a
10
noise?
bedrooms,
Is
or
it
10 people.
Yeah, is it a noise factor? I mean, so we're trying to figure out what are your policy concerns here? Is it, I think it's a lot of things from what I'm hearing is parking, noise, the transient nature of what these things are, because really, I think that the detached versus attached home was probably put in there as a noise measure, because I'll say I think long-term rentals, while they can absolutely go wrong, and you see some of that kind of stuff on the internet here and there where there's a huge party or something, I don't know how much of that actually takes place. We're not in Nashville here, people aren't coming to Columbia necessarily just to party, I wouldn't think, as much as some of those other places. But I don't know, what are your what do you want to accomplish with the short-term rental ordinance? Let me ask you that.
I think you just said a real important one, Evan, and it's in the ordinance. It has to be a detached property. Knowing the way most homes are built in Columbia, if they're attached to another home, there's very little in between. And we hear, Chief can probably back me up on that, we hear so many complaints about the neighbor's noise going through the walls. So if it's detached,
So if you're
that's a big plus.
if you're a businessman or woman that's coming to McGinnis for a meeting or something, you just need a place to stay, right? Is that going to be a problem? I guess, could you not stay on a row home on Manor Street?
the biggest thing I learned as a homeowner was buying a home with great neighbors. They are so hard to come by. Because you can't pick your neighbors.
Right. Well, I
And
wanna know.
anybody can move in and totally upset the cart. Totally. So I hate to say detached or, detached only because
You're asking for trouble.
But what's the difference between a detached or an attached short-term rental versus an attached long-term rental? Because
The
honestly,
amount of calls we'll probably get, that's the difference.
but honestly, the short-term rental, if they're gonna be out and then, you tell the owner of the home, this group is a problem, they need to go, and they kick them out. Whereas a long-term rental, it's a lot harder to get rid of them.
I believe I was on planning commission when we went through all of this. Specifically, we were getting people coming in regarding the Locust Street one. And some of their complaints were, a lot of noise, animals barking. There there were, people will do a whole home like that and have a wedding. And all of these people will just bombard the neighborhood, have this wedding till all hours because there were no restraints on it. They complained about the garbage. They complained about sewers being backed up. And then I also wanted to put out to you that would we need to consider the possibility that property owners that are property developers who are buyers who don't even live in the area. Our short-term rentals don't necessarily limit it to Columbia Borough residents. I mean, people from outside of Columbia could choose to buy a building, turn it into a short-term rental. They're not present. They have.
We were talking about that actually exactly earlier today, and I think because there are certainly places that I've seen that require you to be a resident of that city or borough or whatever the case may be. But in your long-term rental ordinance, you have a provision that says you have to have, if you don't live here, you've got to have a property manager that's within, I think it's 30 miles of Columbia. And I think you could absolutely implement something like that that would keep a local presence here, even if somebody didn't live here but wanted to invest in the borough.
That is true, but I've also heard a lot of complaints about that as well. So,
That's not a perfect system.
and all we're doing is adding to it.
The one difference I can think of between like long-term rentals and short-term is like you're living in a row home next to neighbors who are there long enough, it's still home. Like the dog is always barking at 6. You know, like it's the same dog. If the kids are always running up and down steps at 7:30, and you're like, well, it's soon bedtime, but you're used to it, and so it feels normal to you. So I could see that from. I mean, I have friends live in different areas here in row homes, and that's what you hear. But if it's a short-term rental, and the one guest plays loud music, the next one is completely quiet, but like it's out of the ordinary, so you notice it more. That's the downside of being a connected house. Now, I don't necessarily fall in the camp of voting against having this policy open to everything, because I don't know how you can draw the lines while being fair to everyone.
To that point, I don't think you can be fair to everyone. You know, if you follow that logic, let's be fair to everyone. Let's open the whole system up for anybody who wants to participate. What about, they just sold the home to Long Mansion across the street from us, 55 Chestnut. Somebody was interested in turning that into a multi-unit. Said no, couldn't do it, not allowed to do it. You're in a low density residential area. I want to start a business, put a little flat roof building up there, have 10 employees or so, and start making some widgets. Can't do it. That's not fair. Why are those zone definitions in place? Well, it's because I believe there's two things in consideration here. There's an economy consideration, right? Values of homes, value of whatever that use is to the community, to the neighborhood. If it's a, let's say, a short-term rental downtown, there's certainly obvious economic value to a short-term rental downtown. If somebody comes here and they go to the pub, go to the restaurant, go to the market house, there's an economic consideration there. There's also a quality of life consideration, right? Why was 854 not allowed to become a multi-unit? Because there's an expectation in that neighborhood of a certain kind of feel, quality of life that people pay for and have moved there for. Why can't I put a factory up on 11th Street? Because there's a certain quality of life consideration that people have paid for, and it's zoned that way for a reason. I don't think it should be open all across town. I think those two considerations need to be thought about when you say short-term rentals can be here, short-term rentals cannot be here, and I think that that's the fair way to go about it.
I'll argue the fact that you have industrial zoning simply because industries make noise. They make noise 24 hours a day. That's where I understand that for quality of life. Okay? The long property you're talking about was a multi-unit primary. Okay? Secondly, they could have went and done a variance. They chose not to. And they probably could have won because it was previously a multi-unit.
I don't think you can do that anymore, is that true?
You can
You
apply
can't
for a
take a
use
multi, you
bond.
can't take a single-family dwelling and make it a multi-unit
In some
rental.
places you can, yeah, but the idea is you can apply for a use variance and the zoning hearing board can decide whether or not they want to allow you to change what's allowed within that district. That's what a use variance is.
So even though we have zones, there's also the caveat that you can fight it. And what I'm saying is, why force somebody to go out and get an attorney to fight that zoning restriction? Most people aren't going to go and rent a row when they can rent a home on Locust Street, or they can rent that home on Cherry Street, or even a home on Chestnut Street. They're big single-family homes.
Chestnut Street isn't single-family.
Yes, it was.
Is it? What was it, semi-detached?
They are ideal. But at the same time, it's opportunity, and people are looking at other ways where they can make money nowadays. I don't think it's fair to allow one person to do it, not another person.
But how many single family homes are we gonna continue to lose like this?
You don't lose them.
If we open it up, but you'll be renting them out.
So what?
Well, we're already almost 50% rental now here, aren't we?
No, there's a big difference. There's a big difference. You can be 100% rental. Okay? You still gonna receive tax revenue.
I'm not talking about taxes though, I'm just talking about taking the larger homes and so forth and breaking them up like
You're not-
you were saying.
Well, yeah, I don't wanna see that either. I don't wanna see multi-units. But I do appreciate the concept of taking a home, creating a bed and breakfast or short-term rental or whatever you wanna call it. Airbnb, I guess is the new term. And using that.
But if he just said earlier, he had 5 bedrooms in that one, I know it isn't an Airbnb, but I'm just giving an example. And I believe that you said up to 2 people per bedroom, 10 people could stay there. 10 people in a house that probably before may have had a family of 4 to 6.
Now it goes 5 bedrooms.
Well, I have 5 bedrooms and I have a family of 2, so yeah, it could be.
Yeah, but I mean, then you look at some of our long-term rentals, that one, there were 17 people living in that 1 2-bedroom.
That's
I think that's complicated.
But I think in this case, they're not.
I think that the considerations of the whole body of Columbia needs to be thought about. Life isn't fair. It's just not fair. I think the decision that benefits the economy as a whole and the quality of life as a whole for the boroughs needs to be thought about.
Like I said, parking will solve a lot of this. Most row homes, you're not gonna have enough parking. It might be a 3-bedroom, if you need 3 parking spaces in the backyard, I don't know what you're gonna get.
Right.
So it will, that's what I say, it'll create that strap. 9th and Chestnut Street, park a lot in back.
Yeah.
It'll handle whatever would be necessary.
And that's what I'm saying. Throughout Columbia now, it's not just the Chestnut Street corridor, it's not just Mount Street corridor. Throughout Columbia, there's big homes with property, if somebody may want to do that, I think that opportunity should be available.
As long as they can comply with the parking requirements and everything else.
There's another issue, I don't know all of this. There's like an association for Airbnbs. So there's a report that's filed by the person that rents it. And I think there's also a report that's filed to an association by the person who's renting the property. Is that
Yes.
Is that true?
We filed through the board.
I would think that it may be in the borough's best interest to see those reports.
Does everybody?
It would tip you off, you say about inspections and all, it would tip you off if this Airbnb is downgraded or being downgraded, or that there's an issue there that you may not be aware of.
So I gave you my positive side of it. The negative side was, we have some very good rental units in Columbia. We have some very bad rental units in Columbia. I do not want to go to the flip side and have a Chester Street Mansion as an Airbnb. And I would say Third and Walnut, Provo, as an Airbnb that's $50 a week, or $50 a night or something, you know what I mean? Because that can go the opposite way.
And on top of that, Eric,
So we need to figure out a way to control that as well. I don't know how to do that.
Well, you know, on top of that problem, there's a problem with people not registering, right? How many Airbnbs do we really have in town? How many? Two that we know of.
How many rentals?
Three that we know of.
How many rentals do we have in Columbia?
I don't know, but that's, what I'm saying is, I'm agreeing with you in this respect, right? So, how do you have, these things aren't going away. They're here to stay, right? So it's our job to figure out how do we deal with them, how do we make them an asset for the community, right? Period. You do that by adding economic value and quality of life. So you're concerned about having properties that are upkept, properties that people want to live in, properties that people want to live next to, right, is important. Here's how I perceive everything that comes out of the borough. And I think this is the way most people perceive it. Now, they're on my back again. They're always wanting something from me. Oh, they're clamping down on me and restricting me, right? What if we, much like the association he's talking about, or the CAC committee, right? Or the Downtown Merchants Association, where people who are involved in these endeavors create a group amongst themselves to help to write their own rules, right? To manage themselves, to want to participate, to want to register their properties, to work with Downtown Merchants Association. Hey, if I have a bed and breakfast, we talked about this earlier back in Mark's office. If I have a short-term rental, how can I work with the Downtown Merchants Association to incentivize people to stay at my place because they get coupons that, the pizza shop or whatever that looks like, right? To let them self-manage with the support from the borough instead of making it look like we're trying to control short-term rentals because we don't want them here and we gotta deal with them, right?
No, I agree, I understand.
So,
But I think that'd be a wonderful program to put together.
I think that would help maintain the quality of short-term rentals that you're concerned with.
But
Letting them manage themselves.
we got some comments on it.
Yeah, I know. Yep. All right. Who wants to go first?
Thanks, Em.
Floyd?
Several months ago, maybe 2 or 3, the letter had initially gone to the zoning hearing board, and then we redirected it to the planning commission, and the CEDC, Columbia Economic Development Corporation. This is what we would like to see. This would be our recommendation. limited to the downtown commercial district. And these would be STRs are owned or managed by local hosts or businesses so as to ensure hosts were readily available to their guests and are invested in our community. STR hosts provide information to their guests via printed or digital materials promoting Columbia businesses, events, and outdoor spaces for them to patron and enjoy. STRs report annually to the borough on the number of guests hosted to celebrate success. Overall number of STRs are limited based on research to enable us to preserve our local culture and influence. So to reiterate, it would be in the downtown business district. So you could walk to the market houses, Todd had mentioned, or down to the river park or on the trails. It's all within walking distance. And you would be preserving the other neighborhoods that are a big fabric of our community. I mean, the volunteers that come from here, and then listening to Leo and the land bank development, that's what I think we want to gear our shift over to that concept in our other neighborhoods. And even adopt something like the Charlotte Street Foundation that was in Lancaster years ago. It's disbanded, but they would have awards to property owners who fixed their homes up. And I know in the ad hoc committee's 2040 comprehensive plan, it's mentioned about identifying neighborhoods, the historic value of neighborhoods. And as a citizen, but not as a representative of CEDC, I would take the Freedom Home and make that the model of how a short-term rental should be. It's very historic. It has plenty of parking. It's within walking distance of all the attractions here in town. So that's how I would look at it. But of course, you guys have more debate and more reasoning and ideas to think about. But that would be what the Columbia Downtown Development or the Columbia Economic Development Corporation, that was our recommendations.
Thank you.
Bill, question. And I don't mean to put you on the spot on this question, but this popped in my mind. When I think of the downtown commercial district, I wonder how many properties would be eligible to become short-term rental. Because I'm looking at the downtown business district and I'm commercial district, and I'm saying there aren't a whole lot of homes there. Most of them are businesses with rental units above. I don't particularly want. I'm not particularly enamored with a business on one floor and an Airbnb on a couple other floors. That's why we built. That's why they're building these two over here, Hotel Columbia and Hotel Locust.
That's true.
So I just wonder, is there 10, 15, or whatever? I can't imagine that there are that many properties that would be eligible. And then in the downtown business district, parking, my comments on parking becomes a real issue.
Well, I would then recommend that it's within walking distance of the downtown commercial district.
But let me finish by saying this. I really appreciate Columbia Economic Development Corporation, Columbia Downtown Development Corporation becoming involved in this. I really appreciate that. To me, that's something I wanted to see for a long time. So thank you.
One more fact on rules and regulations. One of our members had mentioned that he supports this wholeheartedly, but make sure that when there's check-in and check-out time, it's not like 2:30 in the morning. I'm sure everybody's aware of that. Make sure that those rules are followed too, because you don't want to get our neighbors upset. So thank you all.
Justin, did you want to add something?
Sure, do you mind?
Hi, buddy, Justin Neal. I own the Freedom Home. So I figured I would just share some information on ours, just what has actually happened. And I've been researching this a lot since June of last year when this all started. But before I dive into mine, I'll share a couple of statistics on Lancaster City as a neighbor, just because I think, as it's been said, I don't know if the question is maybe fairness, but more of wisdom. I think we need to be wise in how we approach it. Otherwise, it gets out of hand, as it was mentioned. In Lancaster City, there's 5,500 people. If you look online, there's only 45 short-term rentals in Lancaster City. Lancaster City actually hired a host compliance company to research actually how many do we have. There's 200. So if you do the math, that's 0.003% of the population in short-term rental. Now, if you follow Lancaster City at all, they are clamping down. It's not going well because of the issues you mentioned. It's not monitored right, short-term available housing it's just not been done. So if we do that same math for Columbia to come up with our own sort of, hey, how many is too many? The answer is 30 is too many. So we don't want to get to 30. If we're sort of learning from our neighbors, we could say, hey, what if the goal was 20 short-term rentals as a suggestion? I agree that they need to be monitored and that we don't want to create extra burden, and I'm sure Discover Columbia would be very interested in that conversation. But also, the trend in short-term rentals is two kinds. There are big homes, or family homes, where a couple people are getting together because someone's getting married at Longwood Farm, or they're getting together to go to Hershey, for sure. That's actually the dying trend in short-term rental. The emerging trend in short-term rental is two couples are getting together, they were traveling across, and they just don't stay in hotels. They just want, 3 or 4 people want to stay at their place. So I think it's a good conversation about how do we accommodate those people that aren't going to rent my 5-bedroom home that costs more than that would cost. We tracked, I don't know if you saw, we published it on Discover Columbia, very meticulously, June through December, in terms of how much was spent per person. Per person at Freedom Home that visited, $229 spent in our town per person. It was $23,328 spent on local food and restaurants, $6,300 on local gift, entertainment. I mean, it's pretty wild when you look at the return on investment to a town, not to my home, to the town, when we do it right. And I'll gladly answer any questions you have. The only other comment I would say is we've had over 60 people in that time frame that came and went, 0 police issues, 0 noise issues, only 5-star ratings on Airbnb, and we're new at this, but what we knew is that we wanted to set a precedent. We wanted to set a bar that says, when people come and go, if you're the host, if you're the manager, just like when people come into any of our restaurants or any of our towns or any of our businesses in town, we have pride in what they remember. And so I think the beauty of what you guys are discussing is we have an opportunity as a community to set that standard and agree that, hey, if we're doing short-term rentals, we're doing it right. When people come and go from Columbia, they're going to come and go from Columbia because they're going to drive by Lancaster City ones that aren't quite done right, and it's just kind of like, how did I get in this place? And yeah, I have my own comments on parking and we'll share them now, but I think we can do it right. I think Columbia can do it better. And I'm really excited about helping figure out how to do that.
Justin, is your property registered officially with the Airbnb?
Yes.
Does every property who does short-term rentals, they don't have to be, do they?
There's 3 big ways that you get guests. 1 is Airbnb, 2 is VRBO. You've heard of that?
Yeah.
The third would be, we'll just call it sort of third party, like you have your own website or an Expedia listing or things like that. But all of those people have to report to the Lancaster County Hotel and Lodging Board.
To Lancaster County.
Yes.
That's who you do.
Yes.
Even in Columbia, you have to report down.
Absolutely.
That's if you're registered.
If you're registered.
Is it possible
So that's
that
the database.
someone would do this and not register in one of those 3?
In like an Airbnb, VRBO, and
Yes, like could somebody possibly just put up a short-term rental and not register with any of them?
100%. You can make that a requirement.
Because we would need to make that a requirement, I think.
But I
Yeah,
mean,
well, I don't know
if you could make them register with a certain website, I would guess it would be really hard to get guests if you're not doing one of those three
That,
things.
it is not easy to get Airbnb. Let me just start there. It is, you have to do your thing well. If you're in Columbia, I'll just say that, you gotta do everything about this. People are like, where? So.
Justin, a couple, this goes out a little further. Your property, your Airbnb isn't rented 7 days a week.
Absolutely not, I wish it was.
Okay, and so do I. But security when no one's there.
So, I think you guys may have made a requirement.
With the lockbox on?
Well, there's that, I mean, there's lockbox, but there's also security,
Alarm.
yeah.
You do have an alarm system
Yes.
hooked into
It's not hooked into yours, it's more of a self-contained,
It's
self-contained. Because in short-term rentals, there's rules about what you can monitor, like inside or around the house, it's a little bit of privacy.
No, I'm more concerned about protecting your property when it's vacant.
Absolutely. Yep, yeah, so that's.
Whether it's the property owner's responsibility, or you hook it into something like some of our businesses. And the same way with the Knox box.
I would say if you're the property owner, you're very concerned about your property and trying to make your own.
Do you think there would be I'll say a pushback from property owners, Airbnb owners, that some kind of security and a Knox box is required?
I think, appearance is a lot to a guest that comes up, so if they walk up to a Knox box on the front of the next door door, I mean, I don't think there's I'll speak for myself, because I think I'm the only approved non-grandfathered one. I wouldn't have a problem if there was something that was simple, that allowed the borough to feel safer about what's going on, and allow me to feel safe. There is a Knox box on the side of our property.
Right.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I'm more concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about protecting your property. If it's vacant, let's say for a week or something like that, someone gets in there and starts cutting copper out.
I mean, I think so, to the CBC.
I'm serious, this
I'm
is
a
serious.
renter.
So to the CBC's research and recommendation, which was 4 months of research they had gone through, one of their suggestions was that those are locally hosted and maintained by locals. We'll just say that, whether they're downtown residents or, because you're just gonna drive by that place every day because you care about your place, and you know when people are there. You almost drive by twice when people are there just to make sure, hey, I don't know if this is recorded, so maybe I shouldn't share this, but I'll just share it. My commitment to my guests, I meet every single guest. I don't have the digital thing, I hate that. I want nobody to walk into my beautiful home without knowing why I love it, why they should love Columbia. I give them a tour, I tell them the history. Is it a pain? Absolutely.
But that's what we would like to see. But our concern is that guy that property owner that lives 25, 30, 50 mile away, or even in another state. That's the concern.
So what if you had what if there was a group that was a welcoming committee to people coming to our town?
That's a point, because I don't like the 25-mile property manager issue at all.
And that should be somebody within a short-term rental committee group with, there you go, you got our chair right there. Full of great ideas, and there's reasons, there's incentives, not just have an Airbnb. There's even better, greater incentives, to have a really good, awesome Airbnb. Okay?
There are 3 people, I don't mean to I just think it's exciting. There are 3 people that texted me, Justin, I saved Columbia on my Zillow homes available since coming to your Airbnb. I'm looking to retire in a few years, and it's on my list. Because of the experience they had. 2 of them were from Virginia, 1 was from there. So we can do it right, that people fall in love with this before they leave. No one has an interest in having the Hershey Park party people come through and try to go up to Hershey, and then that's not what I understand us trying to do with short-term rentals in Columbia.
I think this is almost getting to the point where you're going all day long. your suggestion about a committee or some group
Made up of these
formed,
guys.
yeah, to put this thing together and present it to y'all, makes sense to me. Because I use them, but, I would tend never have one, so I'm not a good person to make rules.
Mr. Rule, if I may, just real quick, in your experience, because you've clearly done a lot of research, what are your thoughts on attached dwellings having these in them or apartments? Because I know when I look at them, for instance, if my wife and I are going to Philadelphia for a weekend, most of those they're apartments or they are, condos or something like that. Do you see more problems in those types of properties than in detached homes, or?
I think that, the short answer is, I don't see a problem in non-detached homes. And here's why. When you're an Airbnb traveler, reputation is everything. If you go and you break a noise variance, you can look on Airbnb thing. They will actually, I don't know what they call it, what color this, but they will dog your profile. People won't allow you to stay at their place. As a host, same thing for hosts, right? Like you've got to be up and up and up. So I think there are incentives for hosts to behave well in places. I have some friends that own them in Lancaster City that are above commercial places, and again, really no issues that I'm aware of. Is there potential for issues in anything? Absolutely. But I think if you put the onus on the host that we need to vet our guests well, you better believe I'm going to vet my guests well, because I want an Airbnb in Columbia. You know what I mean? So I see there's tremendous value in like downtown commercial or above a commercial. Again, I'll share my parking thoughts another time on how to solve that, but that would be my answer.
And yours on Locust Street is connected, correct, on one side?
It is.
Yes. And so you have no issues there?
Zero issues.
Good.
Officially, it was built as a standalone, and then that other house was built next to it, so they share 2 brick walls that have it on it. No, thank you all. I appreciate you guys having this.
Thanks for your investment, Earl.
So what's our next step?
Mary?
Yes, Mary, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mary.
I want to thank Barb for bringing up the issues that brought us to join the short-term rental ordinance. Couple comments here. Parking. One space for every bedroom, and you've got a family bringing a couple of kids. They're not driving. How can you just go there?
Because you have to go.
There has to be a standard.
Right,
You have to go
right.
to the extreme.
And that's the extreme.
Exactly.
Sharon brought up about the property that she thought came to apply, that wanted to be a short-term rental. It was in the 100 block of North 4th Street, and now is a 2-unit rental place.
Oh, thank you.
It's an end of the road there, the one road there. Somebody asked me once where this medium density residential business zone ever came from. That is originally zoned in 1999 when we did our zoning ordinance. That is still, I've got an old 1999 map here, and it's on there, and it's still the same district. Just a couple thoughts here. When we were looking at how to do this, where we felt it would work, Borough, they basically allow it in all their residential, their commercial, their office, professional, by special exception. And that's where we come from, that you can do something anywhere. And unless it is a permitted use, there's always the possibility for an exception or a variance. Ephrata Borough, short-term rentals are permitted by right. Highway commercial, central business, neighborhood commercial, light industrial commercial, general industrial. low, high, and medium density residential, they allow in all of their zones in Africa. And again, I think noise was one of the reasons we went with the idea of detached, because of disturbance. Yet I can say, I live in a attached home, and it is a rental property. I've lived there for over 50 years. And I think one of the things is the owner lives on the first floor, and the rental unit is on the second floor. And in all that time, we've never had an issue. We've lived there since 1975. We've never had an issue with that. But the other thing is, we're still working on our comp plan. And I think a lot of our commitments to any changing our zoning, we are waiting for that comp plan. This is good discussion. I've made notes there of some of the things that have been said here, that when planning starts looking at this. But at this point, to make any changes to our zoning ordinance, it's, I can't say cumbersome, but it's not just a bang bang, here it goes. You know, you've got to go through, have an Evan look at it, we've got to have hearings on it, there's got to be advertising on it. It's a bit of a cumbersome process to make changes to your zoning. So I would hope at this time that any thoughts given to changing this would be delayed, that we keep all our thoughts. This is really good conversation tonight, guys. This is really good. And hold off on any kind of decisions on changes on zoning, which, like with the sign ordinance, we'll be looking at that at planning. So, you know, you tell us at planning if you want something, and we'll work it. Okay? Thank you very much.
Mary, I think you, I'm sorry, Mary. You brought up Ephrata, and I think that's the one I sent you about the municipal brief on Ephrata, talking about the.
That was a township.
Oh, the township, I'm sorry, yeah, never mind.
We were looking at boroughs to see what boroughs.
They did have some outcry there.
It seems like a lot more of the boroughs are more open to welcome to it. Townships are trying to embrace that.
Eric, anything?
No. I do like Mary's comment about the special exception. If we make, I'd be okay with changing the zoning to special exemption, so people have to come through zoning to get approved.
Is it correct, a special exception, if the property changes owners, the special exception goes away? It goes back to the original zoning?
No.
Just a change of use, just a change of use.
Exactly, yeah. And as a reminder, because I know you guys are not the zoning hearing board, but one of my mentors always told me, a special exception is neither special nor an exception.
No,
as long as there are a set of criteria, and if you meet those criteria, then you should be awarded your special exception.
My only thought about putting that in there is, it has to go to a public meeting.
Exactly, it's a great idea.
And then people have the opportunity to. The neighbors have the opportunity.
Absolutely, and I think that's actually a very, very good idea. It does bring all that out of the light, and then they've got to prove that they meet all of those, those whatever criteria we put in place, you've got to meet all of them. So that's never a bad thing in a situation that can be kind of controversial. So.
May I ask a question of Evan?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, what,
I was curious if, like, right now, in the medium density residential business, could you still keep that possibly as a permitted use if they meet all the criteria?
You could, absolutely.
Do you need to keep a permitted use
Somewhere.
somewhere?
If you make it available as a special exception everywhere, then you don't need to keep it as a permitted use. Because if something is, one oddity of zoning law is if something is not allowed anywhere in a municipality, it's allowed everywhere by special exception. And so you wanna make sure that if you don't have something that's a permitted use somewhere, that you've got criteria in the ordinance, or else it just falls back to the general special exception criteria, which are very, very general and kind of amorphous and not necessarily hard to meet. So that would be, if you could, if you would make that a special exception and list out those things, I think it would be a good thing. That would be a good place to start here if you wanted to make this, modify what you've got.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing that.
And remember that there's three processes in zoning really. There's the by right, you come in and do it with your code. There's a special exception, which means if you need additional approval when you go to the zoning hearing board. There's a conditional use, which is basically the same thing, it's just it comes before borough council instead of zoning hearing board. So if this is something that council is concerned about and you want to have a hand in regulating, then it becomes a conditional use and it comes here. Otherwise, if you want to release that to your zoning hearing board, it's a special exception and it goes to them. And that's okay.
What's our next step?
Well, I think we take the feedback now. I would tend to agree with Mary's closing comments. I think this has been a good discussion. Let's get the comp plan finished. Let's look at some changes we want to make. I know that there's some interest from some other property owners to look at short-term rentals. And they're here in the downtown area and other places in town. I think that's great. Let's get through our comprehensive plan process. Let's get that adopted. And let's look at these regulations and change it. We can bring back a summary of these discussions today and look at it at some point. Just get the council you guys chew on. And we're ready to bring it back, we'll bring it back.
So Mark, this is what I want to comment on Mary's comments. I understand that we have the other things that we do yet, but at the same time, out of the three that came forward for Airbnbs, all three were outside the zone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an obvious issue that we have to address.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you want to wait till this is done and that's done, but that could take.
Right, time's ticking, and we've already been waiting for the comp plan for over a year at this point.
Right.
We were told it was going to be done a year ago, and it's still not done. So I get it.
So my thing is, if there's something we could do, like you said, maybe we don't change the whole one. Now, if we don't change the whole thing, do we have to go through the whole process?
Anytime you amend even a letter in your zoning ordinance, you've got to send it, you've got to go through the whole process, including your planning commission, Lancaster County Planning Commission, and hearing and everything. So.
That's fine. I just, by doing this, again, we're making everybody get through zoning. And the outcome's actually 1 to 3, 1 to 2.
Well, a use variance is only very different than a special exception. A special exception is a use that's already allowed. There's just a process to go through. A use variance is, you're saying, it's not allowed in this district, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Right now, it's a use variance.
Except in the medium density residential business, which is allowed by right.
Which they've all been so far. That's what I'm saying.
Right, yeah.
That's why I'm stuck, because this is going to continue to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which is why I wanted to bring this discussion forward, because I think there is, I don't want to say an urgency, but there's a strong interest in making some changes to allow this in the community.
All right. Anything else on short-term rental? No? All right. We're in council comment. Start over there with Councilperson Stahl. Councilperson Price. Councilperson Whitmer. Councilperson Thompson.
I wanted to say to Jack, first of all, last month or so, your department has been overwhelming. You guys seem to have it together, doing well. How is everybody doing?
It's been difficult, but I think everyone's doing reasonably well.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Councilperson McWhorter.
Just a reminder, Friday, April 21 is spring cleanup and large appliance collection day. 8 a.m.
You can probably go get a ticket for lunch.
That just reminded me, sorry. Cat meeting tomorrow night. I forgot. Yes, it will be at the Watson Clock Museum
There you go.
at 5:30.
All right. And I have nothing either.
Oh, that's still.
Oh, is Todd still talking?
No, I'm gone.
All right.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael.
Announcement of the next meeting at 7 p.m. on March 14th, 2023. The council will hold a regularly scheduled meeting. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilperson Kaufman, second by Councilperson Price, to adjourn at 8:20 p.m. All in favor? Aye. Anyone
Yeah, I
opposed?
like,
And
Yeah, from there.
Mary.